So it goes without question that those who live in rural areas have a huge disadvantage when it comes to playing Pokemon Go. However, there are certain things that you can do that will give you an edge compared to those who live in suburban and even urban areas, and that's precisely what I want to talk about in this video. Alright, how's it going everyone? Count Jinsula here with a brand new Pokemon Go video. I hope your day is going really well, and let's get right into it. So currently, I live in a suburban area of Chicago, and with that comes a lot of advantages as well as disadvantages when it comes to playing Pokemon Go. One of the things that I always notice is, of course, there's a lot less points of interest within the suburban communities compared to the downtown Chicago area, and when I jump into raids, typically I will not fill up the raid group unless it's a raid hour, and overall, I feel like playing in a suburban area is totally fine because there's just enough for me to enjoy Pokemon Go. But for anyone who lives in a rural area, yeah, they're going to have even less advantages living in those areas compared to me. And I really do think that overall, Niantic has not done a really good job of mitigating some of the disadvantages that rural players have, and it causes a lot of them to resort to spoofing and a lot of other things that breaks the terms of service. So I really want to talk about some of the things that rural players have that urban players will actually struggle with, and maybe actually drive the conversation towards people who live in rural areas. They do not have it all bad. And I really do think that if you pay attention to this video, there are some things that you will be able to utilize to actually give yourself a little bit of an edge compared to those who live in urban areas. So the first thing is quite obvious, and it's going to be, of course, Pokéstop showcases. I think when it comes to Pokéstop showcases, if you live in a highly populated area, and even in a suburban area, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to complete Pokéstop showcases, or at least place in the top 3. And I think a big reason for that is because the more players that participate in a Pokéstop showcase, the more chances you have of coming in last place, because more players are going to submit their Pokemon. And of course, your rankings are going to fall as more players submit better Pokemon that are going to rank a lot higher. And when it comes to urban areas, it's nearly impossible because there's going to be hundreds of players with every single Pokéstop showcase. But when it comes to rural players, they have a very strong advantage when it comes to Pokéstop showcases, simply for the fact that there's not going to be a lot of players that are going to be playing in those areas. You might be the only player in your area that will be playing Pokemon Go. And because of that, Pokéstop showcases are essentially going to be easy wins. You just have to submit a Pokemon into that Pokéstop showcase, and chances are you're going to win it with no problem. I think that's one of the things that rural players have always told me, is that at the very least, they have Pokéstop showcases, and it's very easy for them to win. In fact, the only players that I know that have the completed Platinum Medal are the ones who live in rural areas. I really do think this is one of those things that if you are a rural player, you should be doing constantly, because you're going to have access to a lot of really good premium items for free. Now, another area where urban players will actually struggle, whereas rural players will have an advantage, is when it comes to gym battles. Yes, when it comes to gyms, of course, you will need to have a bit of a turnaround in order to get your free Pokecoins, and if you live in a rural area, you might run the risk of having your Pokemon never getting knocked out. But as long as you have at least 1 or 2 other players in your neighborhood that is of the opposite team, you're always going to be having a really solid turnaround of gyms, and I really do think this is one aspect of rural gameplay that does give them a strong advantage. A lot of players that I talk to who live in rural areas, they always often say that when they do their run of gym battling in their local areas, they will always walk out with 50 Pokecoins per day. Whereas all the people that I talk to who live in downtown Chicago, they say that it is extremely difficult to actually get their 50 Pokecoins every day. And the reason for that is because pretty much every single gym in their area is going to have a way too high of a turnaround. They're not going to have their Pokemon in the gym for long. If they get lucky, maybe they will have it in for maybe more than an hour, but yeah, it's extremely difficult for them to get their 50 free Pokecoins, whereas for rural players, they could fill up all of the gyms in their area, and slowly they're going to get knocked down over time. And yeah, I think this is one of the strongest advantage that rural players have, and it's something that they should definitely not ignore. Now, a third thing that maybe this doesn't necessarily apply to everyone, because when it comes to rural gameplay, it's going to be really hard to find more than one player, but they have a higher sense of community. When it comes to playing in a rural area, yes, you're going to have very few gyms and you're going to have very few Pokestops, but for the very few gyms that you do have, if there is a raid battle, chances are it's going to congregate as many players within the area. And that means your sense of community is going to be somewhat closer than it would be if you were in an urban area. Within an urban area, if you jump into a raid, you're going to be going with maybe 19 other strangers, and you're never going to see them again. Maybe you will, but it's going to be very rare. But when it comes to rural areas, it's probably going to be the exact same people every single time. So you're going to build yourself up a sense of community much faster. You're going to build up your sense of having a close-knit group of raiders a little bit more than when you would be in an urban area. And I think this is the most felt within suburban areas. But people who live in rural areas, the ones that I talk to, they have 4 or 5 other players that they always play with. When it comes to raid battles, they're always raiding with those raiders. And I feel like their sense of community is very close-knit compared to some of the communities that I've seen here in downtown Chicago. Needless to say, there are some very close communities here in Chicago, but I will say that for the rural players, they always feel a lot closer, and that's just something that I have perceived. So yeah, these are the 3 areas where I will say rural players have somewhat of an advantage compared to those who live in urban and suburban areas, but overall, I do think there's more that could be done to help out rural players, because for all the rural players that I talk to, always when it comes to stuff like Pokemon Go Fest or the Wild Area event or even Go Tour, they always have to drive out 2 hours or 3 hours to go to places like downtown Chicago. And I always feel bad about that. I feel like when it comes to this game, it would do it a lot better if it was a little bit more inclusive. So that way that they could drive up even more engagement. They could drive up more in-game sales, because the more players that are actually playing Pokemon Go on the daily, the more revenue they're going to generate and the more user engagement they're going to generate. And I think between those 2 metrics, user engagement is probably going to be a lot more valuable, because it's going to show that more players are playing the game daily, which is going to lead to them getting higher rankings, and of course, that's going to drive more downloads. So I really do think this is some of the things that Scopely needs to think about once they have started to dig deep into the development of Pokemon Go. Right now, I feel like it's a little bit surface level, and they're just kind of letting Niantic Games handle everything, which is why I keep saying Niantic, because it's still Niantic developing Pokemon Go. But yeah, I really do think overall, rural gameplay is an issue that they really do need to address. It's been a very long time, and it's something that they've somewhat helped over the years, but I really do feel like they need to do more. Yes, there is a lot of things that they have done to make rural gameplay a lot better. I don't know if you know this, but there is something called Campsite, which is a new feature with Niantic ambassadors or Pokemon Go ambassadors, and those community ambassadors can actually sign up one of their local communities for something called a campsite. I was actually able to see one for myself over at Schaumburg Town Square for Pokemon Go Fest. It was actually phenomenal because there was a whole bunch of new gyms and there was a whole bunch of new Pokestops within a very small area, and that was all possible because of Campsite. So yeah, there's a lot of things that Niantic has been doing, but it just doesn't feel like enough. It just still feels like a miserable experience to play in a rural area, and I really hope this is something that they do end up fixing. But in any case, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts regarding everything that I talked about down below. Do you feel like they could do more for rural players? Do you feel like, yeah, within these 3 areas, rural players do have an advantage? And is there something else that they have an advantage in that I did not mention? Make sure you share it in the comments down below, and let's have a great discussion. Thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. If you ended up enjoying it, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if it's your first time here, and don't forget the notification bell so you can stay up to date on whenever I upload videos. Real quick, let me give a shout out to all of my patrons on Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you want to support the Jinsula channel, the best way you can do that is going to be by joining my Patreon. And if you become a paid Patreon member, I'm going to add you to my Pokemon Go friends list. That means for stuff like remote raids, the friendship system, opening and sending gifts, different things like that. If you want to play Pokemon Go with me, then make sure you go and check out my Patreon. I'll put a link to it in the description below. And if you want to support my channel in a completely different way, you're always welcome to do so by following me on social media. My handle is @Jinsula. I'm on the platforms you see on the bottom of your screen. Make sure you go over there and give me a follow, and you'll have access to some exclusive content, and you'll be able to keep up with my daily life. And real quick, I actually opened up an Etsy store. If you are a big fan of K-pop and anime and a whole bunch of other stuff, make sure you go and check out my Etsy store. I'll put a link to it in the description below. Maybe you'll find something that you will really like, or maybe for the K-pop fan in your life, you can get a gift for them. Yeah, definitely go and check it out. I'll try to add new items as much as I can, and hopefully you'll find something that will be to your liking. But in any case, that's going to be it for this video. I'm Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself today, and I'll catch y'all later.